Jabril Robinson was murdered May 16, 2016 in Clayton County, Georgia. Officer Charlie McDaniel radioed for backup, in which Dwayne Parkins was dispatched to the scene. Once Dwayne Parkins arrived on the scene, he came in contact with my son and immediately shot him in the back of his head.
Harry Baxter Jr. was killed by Oakland police on January the 16th, 2011. He ran up the street, and the neighbors of seeing him run up both streets, and they said he was zigzagging, and they were and there was a guy chasing him and shooting at him, and he hit him in the back with a bullet, and Kerry fell to the ground.
Marquise Jones was killed by San Antonio police. On that day, I was getting ready for work, and I saw there was a shooting at Chacho's and Chalucci's around 5 in the morning. And I remember saying they need to close their restaurant down because it is always someone being killed there. There's always fights there, always this. And I see the yellow chalk tarp, and I say, Lord, bless their family. I could hear my sister crying, who is Marquise's son, saying they killed him. I remembering I could not breathe. I could not catch my breath.
Jacob Dominguez was murdered by San Jose Police Department on September 15, 2017. Officer Michael Pena, part of a covert response unit, on unmarked cars, no sirens, no lights, plainclothes officers boxed in Jacob, killing him within 20 seconds of having him contained. No de-escalation. After he was dead, they put in the canine to maul up his throat.
My name is Monty Benjamin, the mother of Javis Benjamin, who was killed by Officer Lynn Thomas of the Avondale State Police Department on January 18, 2013. Javis was not looking in the direction of Officer Thomas. He was engaging with the people in the community. Officer Thomas began to move backwards. Javis then looked in his direction. At this time, Officer Thomas then shot Javis twice, once in the heart and the other in the lower abdomen with his hands raised.
My name is Adrienne Hood, the mother of Henry Green V, who was killed by 2 plainclothes police officers here in Columbus, Ohio, June 6 of 2016. Many of the witnesses that were outside said that the officers never identified themselves. They jumped out the vehicle, all while firing at my son. My son, Henry, was shot 8 times from a total of 22 bullets that were fired at him. And he lay on the sidewalk and took his last breaths.
My name is Janet Baker. My son was heinously murdered by someone who was supposed to serve and protect him. When I wake up in the morning, my son is the first thing on my mind. When I go to bed at night, I labor. Did I do the right things? Did I make the right calls? Did I align myself with the right groups? Did I speak out for justice enough? Or did I say the wrong things? Did I somehow hinder getting justice for it?
My name is Geraldine Brown Bluford, the mother of Alan Dwayne Bluford, who was killed by Oakland Police Department officer Miguel Masso on May the 6th of 2012. Alan, who was not under arrest, not read any Miranda rights, began to leave. As he was walking away from the scene, the police officer turned off his lapel camera and began to chase Alan. Alan was running, according to witness statements, yelling, "I didn't do anything." The officer took out his weapon, shooting himself in the foot. Alan heard the gunshot and fell to the ground with hands up. According to witness statements, the police officer walked over to Alan as he was lying on the ground and shot him in his chest 3 times.
My name is Sheila Banks, the godmother and auntie of Corey Jones that was killed by Newman Roger, October 18, 2015. Police officer Newman Roger approached him, and within a few seconds or so, Corey was running for his life. He was shot at 6 times. He was hit 3 times. And boy, I tell you, our lives have never been the same.
My name is Kathy Scott Lights, mother of Jarvis Lights, who was killed by a Georgia State Trooper on December 29, 2017. They stated that Jarvis exited his vehicle. There was no body cam or dash cam to confirm this statement. It was reported that Jarvis attempted to return back to his car when Officer Nolan attacked him from the back of his body. Jarvis came back up out of his car after he found what he was searching for with his arms raised in the air. State Trooper Nolan stated that he didn't know what that object was in Jarvis' hand, and he shot Jarvis in his right upper shoulder arm. And the object that was in Jarvis' hand was his cell phone, which was found next to his body after he had been shot on the ground, bleeding out.
Welcome to Voices of Struggle and Hope. Mothers speak out on police brutality. This is the 7th of 10 dialogues with mothers from 10 different cities, women who have suffered the loss of a child to deadly police violence. Mothers Against Police Brutality is producing these programs, which will be held at 12 noon and 7 p.m. Central Time all this week. I'm John Fullenwider, a longtime human rights activist and organizer in Dallas. Colette Flanagan, the founder of MAPB, and I are moderating the sessions. Ms. Flanagan founded MAPB in 2013 after her son, Clinton Allen, was shot to death by the Dallas police. Clinton was shot 7 times. Here's a 25-year-old Black man, father of twin toddlers, facing off with a white police officer in Dallas, Texas. He was shot once in his upper arm, as if it were raised. He was shot 5 times in his chest, and then he was shot 1 time at close range in the back. The officer who killed Clinton never faced any accountability, not within the department, not from the grand jury, not at trial, not from the DOJ, not in civil court. In fact, he's still employed by the Dallas Police Department. Colette always says that she turned her grief into fuel to power her struggle for justice for Clinton and others killed by police in America. She asked me and another activist, Sarah Mokuria, who lost her father to police brutality when she was just a child, to help her start Mothers Against Police Brutality. We are currently working on 2 major initiatives. One is to bring the crisis of police brutality in the United States to the United Nations. We've participated in a number of meetings over the past 2 years, and Colette has spoken to the General Assembly. She's spoken to the High Commissioner's Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, and just last month she was in Geneva addressing the United Nations Human Rights Council on this matter. Our second major initiative is the MAPB Fellowship Legacy Program. This is an effort to support the work of directly impacted mothers and families in 10 US cities. The 10 fellows have a track record of advocating effectively for their children and of organizing effectively in their hometowns. Through the fellowship, they're extending their networks and gaining new skills and experiences, which we know will help them become leaders in the broader national movement to change policing. And the fellowship is a major part of MAPB's plan to create and grow a national network of families directly impacted by police violence, centered around the moms in the next couple of years. It's in progress now. And that brings us to Deborah Jones Bush from San Antonio, Texas, who is one of the MAPB fellows. We had over 150 applicants, and she was among the 10 chosen. It's good to be with you today, Ms. Bush.
Hello.
Thanks for being here with us.
No problem at all.
Before we get into deeper into Deborah's experiences with the police in San Antonio, I want to introduce our panelists. First, we have Dr. W. Marvin Delaney. He's an emeritus professor of history at the University of Texas, Arlington. He chaired the Department of History there, and he was the interim director for the Center for African American Studies as well. Dr. Delaney serves on the board of directors of the Texas State Historical Society and the editorial board of a journal called Legacies, a history journal for Dallas and North Central Texas. His first book was Black Police in America, published in 1996 by Indiana University Press. It is still considered the best concise history of this subject. Currently, he is completing a social and political history of African Americans in Dallas, Texas, which is to be published by Texas A&M University Press. Dr. Delaney is an activist scholar, most recently as a key voice in the successful movement in Dallas to take down Confederate statues and icons. Thanks so much for being here, Marvin. I know you've been working recently with the African American Museum in Dallas. Tell us a little bit about your current programs or upcoming programs there.
Sure. I've actually been with the museum for more recently for about 2.5 years, serving as sort of an acting deputy director and chief operations officer. We have a series of programs coming up related to a partnership we have with the Sixth Floor Museum. The Sixth Floor Museum is doing an exhibition called Solidarity Now, the 1968 Poor People's Campaign. So we're doing a panel looking at civil rights in Dallas on the 3rd of December. Then, of course, we're looking at the Kerner Commission report on December 10th, of which you will be a part. Then we're bringing a brother from Atlanta here to talk about his biography, that he's written. His name is Rolandus Rice. He'll be talking about Hosea Williams, who's very instrumental with the Poor People's Campaign of 1968, which of course took place in Washington, D.C. So those are sort of the series of programs that we get coming up here at the African American Museum.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for being here too. Our second panelist is Reverend Ray Jordan, and I would have to call him a trailblazing preacher, an activist, an academic, and a consultant to both nonprofit and for-profit organizations. An ordained minister, Ray is currently the lead pastor of First Community Church in Dallas in the United Church of Christ. He is, in fact, the first African-American pastor of this church in its 73-year history. That's what I mean by a trailblazer. In addition to his work as a community activist and local church pastor, Ray teaches courses at SMU in the Department of Graduate Liberal Studies and in the human rights programs there, teaches human rights and social justice. Ray also is gets out of the pulpit and out of the classroom, and he's marched with us. I've marched with him many times, I'll say. And I know he was, Ray, I know you were involved in the protests in the summer of 2020. Maybe just tell us briefly what happened to you and your kids out there one night.
We gathered, my two younger children who were 19 and 16 at the time. We gathered at the police department to join voices and forces with many other citizens after the killing of George Floyd. We moved away from the police department because there was a curfew put into place. And we moved to the Frank Crowley Courthouse, where I was one of the speakers at the rally. About 8 o'clock, we decided to go. It was getting dark. We parked in the parking garage there on Riverfront, if those who know Dallas, and we were prevented from leaving. The police had blocked the entrance and the exit. When I jokingly asked if we were being held hostage, I was told by that police officer, if it were up to me, I'd let you go. But I've heard from higher up, whatever that means, that no one is to leave until the demonstration is over. I pointed out the demonstration is over and we would like to go home. We were prevented from going home. And as the marchers began to march up Riverfront, I had a 19-year-old daughter and a 16-year-old son. It was dark at this time, and we're hanging out in front of Lou Sterrett, and it didn't feel safe. It felt like it would be safer to join the crowd. Well, I naively thought the police were there to do crowd control, as we were intentionally ushered onto the Margaret Hunt Hill Bridge. Midway across the bridge, the lights went out, like someone hit a switch. My 19-year-old daughter, in her wisdom, looked at me and said, "Daddy, maybe this wasn't a good idea," because we had the Trinity River on our left and to our right. We were approaching SWAT officers in SWAT attire. In front of us, as I grabbed my children's hands and began to back up, we noticed that there were another line of officers sandwiching us. I now know that the term is called kettling. This police procedure that does not de-escalate, but it actually, makes it worse. So we were assaulted on the bridge that day with about 200 other persons and detained, robbing us of our First and Fourth Amendment rights.
This is a not uncommon thing. The Dallas police were enjoined shortly after that mass arrest and detention from using their crowd control tactics and any of the other things they'd been using in that summer. And they were enjoined all the way into the fall, and so there was some relief from a federal court there.
And as a reminder, the chief of police of Dallas resigned over that incident.
Let me just tell you a little bit about Deborah Bush. She is an organizer with a group called Reliable Revolutionaries of San Antonio. She works with the Texas Organizing Project. She's testified many times in front of the Texas legislature on these issues, including in our session in 2021, where she spoke about the George Floyd Act, the Texas version of the George Floyd Act. Deborah, I wonder if you would start off just by telling us about your nephew, Marquise Jones. What kind of a person was Marquise?
Marquise was the clown of the family and also very caring. He was always into something and always want to create something. Every holiday we would have, Thanksgiving and Christmas, him and his cousins would get together and make these skits, or they do dance routines and stuff like that for us. He was a very loving person. He loved playing basketball. He played for his high school, Stevens, here in San Antonio, and also the UIL, which is the city or the state basketball program on several occasions. As he got older, he had a couple, small run-ins with the laws, but never nothing major to where he had to go to jail or go to prison. He was just a fun-loving guy all the way around. He had, right before he was killed, he had a daughter who was actually only 6 months old when he but like I said, he was a fun-loving person. He was the the jokester of the family, and just always had us laughing.
Thank you. It's so often that a person who is harmed by the police, beaten or killed, is vilified by the department in their press releases, and that follows, the media follows right along. And sometimes I think that a mom or an auntie wouldn't even recognize their child, the way they're portrayed in the press as they try to dehumanize them.
Yes.
Marquise was 23 years old.
Yes, he was.
And this was a cold February night.
Yes, February 28th of 2014.
I'm sort of easing up to this because I know that what I'm getting ready to ask you to do is going to be painful, but I think it's instructive for us and for the public to know more about what happens to a family and what really happens when someone is shot to death by the police. Could you take us back to that day in February 2014 and tell us what happened to Marquise and then how it affected the family?
I was actually getting ready for work. It was like 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm up getting ready for work, and I'm watching the news, and I see that it had been a shooting at the Chachos and Chaluchis, which here in San Antonio, that was the main hangout for a lot of people. And there was always fighting, there was always killings, there was always shootings and all that kind of stuff. So when I saw it, I was like, they need to close this restaurant down because someone is always getting killed, either there or near there. So I proceeded to continue to get ready for work, and my phone rings. When your phone rings at that time in the morning, you know it's not a good phone call. And as soon as I picked up the phone, I heard my sister, who was Marquise's aunt, crying, and she said they killed him. And I was like, they killed who? Like, they killed Marquise. Well, I hung up with her and I tried to call Marquise's mom, my sister Cheryl, but I couldn't get through. And at that time, I felt like all my breath was gone. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't cry. I didn't know, my emotions were everywhere. I didn't know what to do. So finally I got a hold of my sister, and all I could hear was my sister moaning. And I said, I'm on my way. And I called my husband. He was already at work. I said, I need you to get me and go to Cheryl's. So we get to Marquise's house, and everybody's standing outside. My sister's just moaning because I believe she had cried so much that she couldn't cry anymore. So I said, where is he? Where is he? So I went back up to the restaurant, and Marquise is out there. They have the tarp, the yellow tarp. And the officers, they have us back. And I say, can I please just go over there? I just want to see if this is my nephew, which I already knew because his sister and her best friend, they had went to play billiards that night, and they stopped by the restaurant to get tacos. There was a fender bender, and Marquise's friend, the driver, bumped someone in front of him in the drive-thru. When they get out, they're checking everything. But the cashier informed the security who's in there that there's been an accident in the drive-thru. So he comes out and he does not question anybody, he does not say anything. All the witnesses say he just grabbed the driver and slammed him on the hood. And so Marquise was in the car, and Marquise only lived maybe two blocks away. He gets out the car, and his sister says, you're okay, bro. You're good. You just reported you're good, because he was on probation. As he got out the car, he decided that I'm going to just go home. This is not about me. I'm going to go home. That's what we're thinking. And the officer never said, stop, stay here, get back in the car, nothing. He pulled his weapon and fired at Marquise 9 times, with one bullet hitting Marquise in the back, killing him instantly. Like I said, I went back up there. I wanted to get there. They wouldn't let us in. I just wanted to be there with him because he was by himself, and I just felt like I needed to be there with him. They wouldn't let us in. Backtrack, how we found out he was dead. They took everybody downtown. They took my niece's phone from the video, the dash cam video we saw in the car. Whitney was crying and saying, "Can you please just let me call my mom and dad? I need to call my mom and dad." They told her to shut up or else she would be arrested and charged with obstruction. So they get her, they take her phone and everything. They question whatever. She said they dropped her off at the house and told her, "Now you can call your parents." So Marquise died at 1:30 in the morning. We didn't find out after 5 because they held her downtown. My sister just wanted to see her child, so we waited, and I kept calling the coroner's office. He wasn't there yet. So finally he was there. They were like, "No, you cannot come and see him." She was like, "I just want to see my baby. I just want to look at my baby." And they told her, "No, you would have to wait till you got to the funeral." Well, I called down there, and the guy said, "Off the record, I can't say anything else but off the record. Yes, we do have it." And I was like, "Okay, thank you." We protested that evening. We were in front of Chacho's Chaluchi. From that day forth, we were out there every Saturday for like a year and a half until they non. And when they non-billed, how we found out they non-billed was through the news. And I called the DA's office. I called our lawyer and I said, "Daryl, they non-billed the police officer?" He was like, "No, I haven't heard anything yet." They didn't call anybody. The city didn't let anybody know about anything until the news told us. And I called the DA. We met with the DA. He goes, "Oh, our bad. Maybe we'll get it right next time." So my sister's hasn't been the same. She used to be a cheerful person, always laughing. She smiles and she laughs now, but she's in a lot of pain. And I ended up being the spokesman. And I told my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law, that day that Marquise still, "I got this." I don't know where the strength came from. I don't know. Because I'm a very I'm an introvert. I can't stand being around a lot of people or doing a lot of things. But I guess God was like, "You're going to be the voice for your family." And he has given me the strength to continue to fight. I ended up being an activist here in San Antonio for several other families and organizing with families on police shootings. I just started founding my organization, the Marquise Jones, is to help. We want to start where we can hold police accountable for their actions and what they do, and also for any mother that has lost a child, whether it's police brutality or street violence. My family's the holidays haven't been the same. I'm sorry, I'm such a crybaby. He's missed greatly. His daughter's 8 years old now. We had to get her help because she had a sibling that had a dad, and she used to always say, "Why my daddy can't come get me? Why can't I go see my daddy?" So these police don't understand that the impact that they leave on the families. They go on with their lives, they go on with their jobs, but we're here suffering for the rest of our lives because we never got justice. We never got anything, and each time there's a shooting, anywhere in the country, it's a scab that's pulled off the wound, and we're bleeding and crying all over. Our loved ones didn't deserve to be killed the way they are, and the cities, I know San Antonio is so disrespectful to the families of shooting. You know, they don't care. They laugh. The officer that killed Robert Encina, that killed Marquise, when George Floyd got killed, there were major protests in this city. And it angered me because we have shootings here and nobody comes out. We got thousands of people on the street for George Floyd. Barely could get 50 people here in San Antonio for our loved ones that are. And so I started making a big ruckus again about us. What about us? And they so-called opened Marquise's case up and re-looked at the case. And then they said, well, there was a questionable gun found at the scene. They never proved the gun was Marquise's gun. There were no fingerprints on it. And they waited 2 years after the shooting to fingerprint it and everything, and found out there was no DNA of Marquise on this gun whatsoever. And the noise I was making about reopening the cases, we found out that the officer that killed Marquise in 2013, he was involved in a murder out on Highway 90 with some other cops that held a knee to Jesse Agitti's neck and killed him. And he was part of that lawsuit also. So he got nothing for that. He got nothing from Marquise, but he ended up resigning. And he left, but he ended up he's at another police, I was my train of thought. He's a police officer at another police department within the city, but you know, you have your outskirts of the cities, but it's still San Antonio. He's an officer in that area.
Deborah, thank you so much for going back through that story. We're going to reflect on this issue, this crisis in policing, by, I hope, a careful exploration of what happened to Marquise and how it relates to the broader sense. And I noticed a number of things in this terrible night and the aftermath that are not uncommon, although they're horrible. And one is that Marquise was shot in the back, which means he was leaving the scene, which means he was not any threat to the life or serious injury to the officer. And an officer, they're not even supposed to pull their gun unless they feel they're in danger for their life or serious injury. So that's basically the law of the land from the case in '84, the Garner case. And then most police departments have a policy on deadly force, and they're supposed to, you know, if he had followed the policy, he would have said, don't leave yet, I just need to talk to you, you know, verbal command, you know. And unless Marquise escalated the situation, which he wasn't doing because he was leaving, the officer never should have got to his gun, you know. The other thing is that if Marvin and I are playing poker and I get mad and pull my gun and shoot him, I'm not going to empty my gun, you know. I'm not going to shoot that many times, but police officers almost always empty their gun, you know. The treatment of the family, not allowing anyone to see the body, you know, learning about it on the news while you wait for something, you know. And then I'll just mention one other thing, and I'm gonna pass it to our panelists, but the dispute over the evidence and what looks like the suppression of the evidence, or even the creation of false evidence with this gun they supposedly found a couple of years later, you know, later in the process. So we have and also the engagement starts with violence from an off-duty cop, you know, slamming the driver. So it has a lot of elements that we see, and it has a lot of elements for which there are actually rules against it, acting that way, you know, as you found out, as you explored it. But we have to ask ourselves, and I know you have, why is it that these reforms don't take? You know, you can have a rule against shooting someone who's running away in the back, and yet they still do it. Sometimes I wonder if the vein of violence and the current of violence and racism really in these departments is so deep that these reforms just don't touch it. But I want to pass this to Marvin now, and Dr. Delaney. Sorry, we're old friends. And get your reflections on it. Thank you again, Deborah.
Ms. Bush, I'm going to just say I feel your pain, and I can feel deeply about what you went through as well as your family. I've been out here myself for 50 years trying to find a solution to police killings, to police brutality, with the thought that if we train them, if we talk to them about the impact of what they do on the streets, that things would change. John sort of alluded to something, that it seems like nothing changes this situation. And I sort of see it broadly as more than just the police. And John sort of alluded to the fact that we live in a violent society. And as a result, the police sort of reflects it, reflects how violent our society is. And indeed, it's sort of endorsed and pushed and supported by the general public. You see some things happening, like the mass shootings in our schools. And we see, and again, I'm sorry to bring up another problem, but it is indeed as if our community, our society does not have the will to act on certain things. It's like it has been going on for so long, so that it just reverberates on from the past into the present and then on into the future. My work has indeed been with the police. I've worked with the Arlington Police, the police in Charleston, South Carolina, the police in Providence, Rhode Island, in an effort to raise the consciousness of the police. But they fight you, even in the training sessions, basically giving you scenarios sometimes of, what was I supposed to do when someone called me a name or when someone spit in my face, and you say to them, well, you are trained as a police officer not to react and to escalate these situations, but they do. And what also happens, I've talked to, I'd say about 300 Black police officers all across the country during the course of my own career. And they tell me that they learn things in the academy, but when they get on the streets, the officers that are training them, telling them, forget everything that you learned in the academy, because it doesn't work out here. You got to kick butts and take names in order to control the situations on the streets. And so since they're telling you this, then this is indeed what happens. I started, as I said, I alluded to the fact that I sort of started this research 50 years ago, hoping that we can make change. But as you see, and I admit now, total failure in terms of changing the things that have happened in policing in the last 50 years. One of the things that struck me, and again, I know this doesn't help you in terms of your cases, what happened with the police chief here, Reverend Jordan. It was sort of mind-boggling that our police chief here in Dallas, Black woman, comes in and everything just sort of continues to be the same. The thing that bothered me is when Botham Jean was killed, they published the fact that the young man had used marijuana to discredit him and to attack his character. And I said, how could this happen? This is a Black woman who's police chief. And yet the same old policies and the same old practices can continue. And again, what happened to you, Reverend Jordan, it just mind-boggling. You throw your hands up thinking, will this ever change? Does it even matter who is the police chief now? Because this stuff just continues. It's like it has its own inertia, and it goes on and on and on. But I want you, John, we've got to legislate. We've got to find some politicians who have the guts, to legislate against these things, such as one of the things you proposed when we were talking a couple years ago. Indeed, creating a database in which we put these officers who do these things so that they can't get jobs just outside of their jurisdiction where they've already created the problem. So I'm going to pass this to Reverend Jordan.
Thank you, Dr. Delaney, who's also an old friend of mine. It never ceases to amaze me that as we continue to enjoy scientific and technological advances, sometimes I think we're living in the Jetsons, that we can pick up our phones and have all the information in the world at our fingertips. We have made our lives so much easier, yet we also continue to find ways to destroy each other. It never quite ceases to amaze me. I think it was Dr. King who said, our scientific power has outrun our spiritual power. We have guided missiles and misguided men. I bring that up because for me, the heart of the matter is the heart of the matter, and that is humanity. Ms. Bush, as I listened to you talk about your nephew, it reminded me of other testimonies that I've heard from people who have experienced similar pain. You called him the clown of the family. You talked about his daughter. You, in essence, shared personal anecdotes so that you could humanize him. But for me, the question that echoes in my heart and mind is, why is humanity in question? Why do we have to, whether it's Botham Jean, your nephew, George Floyd, Miss Flanagan's son, on and on and on, why do we have to humanize the victims? Why is their humanity even in question? And to me, that's the heart of the matter. It's an age-old problem, meaning for the last 400 years, people of color, particularly those of African descent, have had to argue for our humanity. The people who are sworn, who take an oath, and who are paid by our tax dollars, not to harass and harm, but to protect and to serve. Why should we have to argue our humanity to the very people being paid to protect it, to serve it? For me, that's the heart of the problem. Also, I was in Denver last year at a layover. I had a long layover, so I decided to go out in the city and bumped into a young woman who was a police officer from LA. She was also visiting Denver. And she was a Latina. And as we began to talk about the issues with policing in Black and brown communities, she offered something that I thought was really interesting and eye-opening for me. She said that I believe one of the number one issues with policing in America is recruitment. That when she began to highlight in her own local community as a police officer, instances that broke protocol, broke procedure, and broke the law, when she began to help police and hold accountable her fellow officers, she said she experienced the blue wall. They shut her out. And in her words, when you are a police officer and you have been shut out, it's dangerous. You're basically taking your life into your own hands, because when you call for backup in a tense or a serious or dangerous situation, you need to be able to count that your fellow officers have your back. But when they shut you out and you experience the blue wall, they're telling you, you can't count on backup. So she had to leave LAPD and join the police force of LA Unified School District. So she says, I hang out in schools all day and try to mentor and help young people because I was basically pushed out of the LAPD. This in part is the problem. And she says that most of my colleagues who were recruited to the force were recruited from the military. When you are trained to be a combat military officer, you're trained to see the combatant not as human. You're not trained to see their humanity. You're trained to see them as an enemy of the state. You're not trained to shoot to injure when you're from the military. You're literally trained to shoot to kill. There's no time when you're in the desert or in the back jungle of some place fighting the enemy to talk it out. So then, therefore, we recruit those same people who have that kind of training, and they're not policing, as she pointed out to me, they're not policing their own neighborhood. She said, I grew up in South Central. I am policing areas that these people are my family, they're my neighbors, they're who I grew up with. I see them as human. These officers recruited from the military, oftentimes with PTSD and other effects of war, who have been trained to shoot and kill brown people, let's just call it what it is. For their whole career, they've been trained to shoot and kill brown people. And then they come back to our neighborhoods, Black and brown neighborhoods, and they are now policing us. They are not serving and protecting us. When I teach students, I began teaching at UTA actually in the Center for African American Studies, and did that for a number of years. But when I teach my students, whether when I was in community college teaching and now at SMU, I often bring up the fact that if you don't see me as human, if you don't recognize my humanity, then you can do all kinds of things to me. You can other me in all kinds of ways. You can kill me, rape me, you can imprison me, you can enslave me. There's all kinds of things you can do without, and go home and sleep well at night if you don't recognize my humanity. So I lift that, and from a fellow police officer who was able to, I think, astutely identify some issues within that ecosystem of policing in America, that there are many issues that we need to change. But I'll leave you by saying this. This issue, this policing, this sanctioned killing in America is being done in our name. I believe in democracy. We're fighting for it right now to keep it. And in democracy, it's we, the people. I've never quite understood looking at anything happening in the government, local, state, or federal, and somehow seeing it as other than myself. If this is being done with my tax dollars and it's being done in my name, therefore it's my problem. Elie Wiesel, Holocaust survivor, Nobel Peace Laureate, passed away in recent years, often said, when you hear a witness, you become a witness. Ms. Bush, thank you for sharing your story and sharing your family story, as painful as it has been. We now, and those listening and those who will listen to this recording, we have now heard a witness. Now, for those of you listening, those of you watching, it's now our responsibility. Ms. Bush and her family can't do it alone. It's our responsibility because we are the people. It's our nation. It's being done in our name. And therefore, Ms. Bush's nephew is not just her nephew, it's my nephew too. It's my family too. Her pain is my pain because we're in it together.
Thank you, Ray. I wanted to ask Deborah, and I wanted to bring up one thing that she mentioned, and that is that by the protest, by the power of protests, they actually got the DA to open this case again. Ultimately, it didn't come out as we wanted, but there is a power in this movement. And I wanted to ask Deborah to just speak to that. You weren't actually an activist before this happened to you.
No, I was not.
And talking about how you keep going. You know, the public and the press move on. This happened 8 years ago now. But you press on, you keep pressing on. Talk to us about that. Where'd you find that fire inside?
Just keep looking at the mothers here that I am involved with and seeing their pain, and then also seeing how San Antonio has a way of covering things up here. Seeing the shootings continue to happen across the country. I don't want another I wish, and it's a big wish, that we could that it can stop. You know, families are hurting. These officers have these nonchalant attitudes of, oh, well, you know, and then the media putting out how, oh, he had a trace of marijuana, a trace of cocaine in his system. Those are the narratives that they keep going. Every time they talk about the story, that's the one thing they keep wanting to say, what the person was doing, or were they high, or drinking, they were drunk, to keep it where the victim is the enemy. That keeps me fighting and fighting and fighting because of the mothers. The mothers aren't giving up, so why should we give up on them? They're continuing to fighting. I'm in this group with these young ladies, and my heart goes out to them. I have a 31-year-old son, and he was Marquise's best friend. I couldn't imagine, as much as I go for Marquise, I couldn't imagine it being my own, because I wouldn't be here talking to you if it was mine. I'm just gonna say it just like that. I'd either be dead or I'll be in jail. These mothers have a strength, including my sister, that I couldn't even imagine having. So for them to continue to fight, that keeps a fire burning in my belly to continue to fight for them and with them, to where we can get changes starting at the lower level and moving up to the higher level.
One thing that the first police case I worked on was back in 1978. And I guess over the past 4 decades, I've worked with a lot of families, worked on a lot of cases, usually just as a foot soldier, you know, sometimes in a leadership role. But some families retreat after this happens. Some do not, like Colette and like Deborah here and others. And there is let me put it like this. I've seen many waves of protest come locally and nationally in that time. Only occasionally do you hear Mike Brown's name anymore, you know, but the national protests after his killing in 2014 were quite powerful. And then, of course, after the death of George Floyd and others that are well known, there are waves of unrest. And Deborah, you mentioned something that, you know, every day the police kill 3 people in America, and God knows how many people they rough up, beat, kick, etc. So it's not like a spectacular thing that happens 2 or 3 times a year that the press might pick up on, you know. It's literally happens every day. And so when the waves of protest die down, you know, or recede, think of them as receding, it's the families of the victims that are left standing there. And we call this thing, these series, Voices of Grief and Struggle, for that reason. Sometimes it seems like all America leaves a family after this is grief and struggle. But there is a power there, you know. This ocean of protest seems like it sweeps the world away, and then it recedes, and you could put the whole movement in a cup, you know. But who keeps that cup filled is you and your family and other families that don't forget, you know. You could almost say that a credo of this movement is we remember, you know, even when America forgot. And I thank God for what you're doing. And I thank God for the other women that have joined the fellowship and are working on this. You've testified in Congress, not in Congress, but at the state legislature several times. What were some of the changes that you were testifying in favor of? What were some of the things that you were working on?
Getting rid of qualified immunity,
right,
and police accountability. Those were the two main things that's the two main things I know here in my city that I want gone. Those two things need to be gone. And we actually are fighting a bill right now to put to vote for police accountability. And we have to have 30,000 signatures for it to even be to get on the ballot. So there are organizations here that are doing that so we can vote and have police accountability. Because without accountability, they're going to keep doing what they want to do.
And this is a referendum in San Antonio?
Yes, it is. And also
qualified immunity.
Qualified immunity and the I hate this happens.
Listen, I'm 70. It happens to me all the time.
I can't. My brain.
While you're thinking, let me just mention for the audience, if they're not familiar with qualified immunity, a family can seek justice after being abused or a family member killed by the police in criminal court. That's where you hope the grand jury and the DA will put together an indictment and maybe get it to trial, and maybe the jury won't just side automatically with the police officer. And that method of getting accountability is so rare that it's really insignificant. You know, maybe 1% of the cases every year get indicted or prosecuted, and less than that are a conviction, you know, result in a conviction. So a family goes into civil court with a wrongful death suit. And when they get there, they often, early in the process, the cases will be dismissed because the cops will put forward a defense of qualified immunity. And it's a judicial doctrine that was supposed to protect a public servant honorably performing their duties, whether they're a public health worker or a police officer, whatever they are. But it's been used, it's created, let me put it like this, it's almost unconditional immunity, because in order for a family to meet in court and defeat that defense, they have to show that within that circuit, within that court, there's a case with the exact same facts that was adjudicated to be okay or adjudicated to be wrong. And so if the facts are slightly different, or if the facts are the same, but the defense worked, well, then in this case, it works too. And it's very hard to get around. And even some judges today are rebelling against it, so to speak, because it's it really is almost like an unconditional immunity, although it's called qualified immunity. And I know that Colette ran into that in court, and many, many others, cases that we pulled, even people we don't know that we pulled their cases. And that was the thing. And of course, the Texas legislature might make you think you're up against an iceberg trying to get them to do something. But still, there's power on the other side, power to change things. And I'll say this, having researched police shootings in Dallas for many years, there's actually fewer killings now than there were back in the 70s and 80s. And it's partly because of how they policed back then, and it's partly because of there were many more encounters in the 80s, in the early years of the war on drugs. So one of the things that comes up is that maybe we should reduce the number of encounters the police have with the public, because they're dangerous encounters. Let me ask, we've got a few minutes left here. Let me ask Ray and then Marvin their final reflections on the matter, and then I'll ask Deborah to have the last word.
Okay. Well, you want
go Ray. Let's have Ray first, and then Marvin.
Okay. So I just want to quickly say how much I am indebted to Ms. Bush, to the other family members who are sharing their stories, and to MAPB for having the vision to put this kind of programming and this type of program together. I'm again reminded of Dr. King, who said, if you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. Or if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But by all means, just keep moving forward. That's my prayer for Ms. Bush. That's my prayer for MAPB in this incredibly important work. This issue is not going away until we stand up as a community and as a nation and demand that change happens. I pray that as the photo you see behind me, as a phoenix rising from the ashes, that this movement will change America and will save our sons, so that your pain will be a seed for this and no one else has to encounter what your family has had to encounter. That is my prayer. Thank you for sharing, and thank you, John and MAPB, for the platform.
Dr. Delaney?
Sure. Sorry, I had a heater running in this office. John, thank you for the invitation to participate in this series of panel discussions. And again, I would thank you and Colette for continuing this struggle, because without you, God knows where we would be. But I'm sort of taken aback, because I've watched, being a historian, you watch things as they happen and you compare them to the past. And I'm like you, Ms. Bush, I wonder why there was such an outcry over the killing of George Floyd, when we know this has been going on continuously. And I guess I've tried to explain it to other people, because I've been asked that question. I said, well, it's not every day you see a police officer kill somebody in the street, in front of cameras, and just do it without no restraint, as if he knows nothing is going to happen. Well, fortunately, as we all know, something did happen in this particular case. I just wish we could get more justice in these type of cases, because without having it broadcast all across the country that indeed, when a police officer kills somebody in the streets or anywhere, they should be prosecuted just like any other American citizen. So again, John, I'm going to stick with you and stay with you as much as I can. So just let me know when you need me.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Deborah, when you're thinking about what you're going to say, I'm wondering if, the George Floyd Act died in the Texas legislature and it died in the US Congress. If you could address a joint session of Congress on this matter, what would you say to make them get off their behinds and do something?
But if you put yourself in our position, if it was your child, if it was your son, your daughter, your nephew, people tend to only want to be involved when it hits their front door. Show us that you care about us. You say in your campaigns you care, and you love your country, and you love this, and you love the people of the country. Well, we're people too. Black and brown are people too. And a lot of us are voters, and we vote you in on what you say. And I think we need to hold a lot of our representatives accountable for what they campaign for. And like I said, I would say, what if it was your child? How would you feel if it was your daughter, your son? And just show that you care about us.
Thank you. Is there, if someone wanted to help with the San Antonio referendum, is there a website you might want to tell us
yes,
about?
it's called act4sa.com. And and it'll take you to a portal where you can You can leave your name, email address, and whatever else.
And make a contribution.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's ACT for SA, like SA, the initials for San Antonio.
Yes.
ACTforSA.com.
Yes.
We're going to leave people with something they can do, as well as think about this issue. We are in a crisis in this country in policing. I think the pandemic sometime made us think that 1,000 deaths, not so much when 1 million died during the pandemic. But 1,000 people killed by the police in this country is a national crisis. And it's not going to be solved just with a local change in police policy. We are going to need the Congress of this country to address this issue. And when we think of this issue, I hope we'll think of young men like Marquise Jones, who did nothing more than get out of a car that he wasn't even driving and leave the scene where it looked like it was going to get violent. I think of young men like Clinton Allen, who was, except for the shot in the back, wasn't even close to the officer on those shots. And think about the hundreds of others, people that never made even the local news, really. And no one knows about them but their own grieving families. If you want to get in touch with Mothers Against Police Brutality, you can go to our website, mothersagainstpolicebrutality.org, get on our mailing list, and you can check our latest stuff on our Facebook page. We will be here tonight at 7 o'clock. Colette will be moderating, and then we'll be here tomorrow at noon and at 7 o'clock. So hope we see you then. And thanks, everybody. Thanks so much for being with us today, Ms. Bush and Dr. Delaney and Pastor Jordan.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.